Okay, welcome Super Secret Agent trainees to WhizGirls Academy. Today we have a phenomenal mentor with us, Ashley Pilipiszyn. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Awesome. So Ashley is a super duper role model in STEM, and we're so excited to have her share her journey with us. So welcome, Ashley.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Okay, so tell us about your childhood.
Yeah. So for me, grew up in the Midwest, grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And for me, I loved being outside, like being outdoors, biking, running, really just my early days of going on adventures, whether that was the neighborhood park with my friends to play sports, to go read a book. I loved going to the library. That was my other thing. And so since we're in the middle of summer right now, one of my all-time favorite things besides being outside was that when it was too hot, the library obviously had some of the best air conditioning. And it's also where I really fell in love with adventure books as well. And so, as a kid, I wasn't able to like travel by myself, anywhere to distant lands. But books were the first opportunity that I was able to, travel the world, if you will. And so and then also I'm competitive because of sports. And so I would also try to see how many books I could read every summer or every week. And I also love that as well. The other thing that really stood out to me growing up in Chicago was I loved going to all the museums. So me and my siblings, my parents would take us to the Children's Museum at Navy Pier. I'm not sure if it's even still there anymore. Loved going to Brookfield Zoo, learning about all the different animals and where they came from. And then, places like the Shed Aquarium. So again, these very early moments really planted a seed for me that got me excited about exploration, seeing the world, meeting new people. And a fun little story that I'll share is, so growing up, I was really close with my grandmother. We called her Grammy. And one of my favorite games to play with her is I'd go over to her house on the weekends and we'd go up into the attic and we'd play the exploration game. And what this game is we would go through all these old boxes and just find these different artifacts, everything from Valentine's Day cards that my grandpa had written for her when they were young, or old encyclopedia books, or even different types of board games from like decades ago. And my grandma would tell us all kinds of stories about, these different objects, et cetera. And so when I think back, I always had this kind of wanderlust to see the world, meet new people. And it all started kind of with this, exploration game that I used to play when I was really little.
That's fascinating. And thanks for sharing that so honestly, because I think I grew up going to the library too, and I still love going to the library. In fact, I just got Elon Musk's 600-page book, which I'm like reading like frantically every night before I go to bed. And It's wild because I think, our generation grew up in a different way and the library's still around, but I don't hear people saying they're going to the libraries much. So I think that's an important thing to share. And I'm glad that you brought that up because there's a lot of adventures that you can find in the library as well.
Exactly.
All right. So tell us a little bit more about your passions and hobbies as a child. And then did you have a dream job?
Yes, I had a couple of dream jobs. So very, very first dream job, like many people, was to be an astronaut. My uncle was a pilot with the airlines for almost 40 years. And he currently still lives in Florida. And so him and my grandpa went to Kennedy Space Center. And so I must have been, probably 7, 8, 9 years old. And they went to this Kennedy Space Center and they brought me back this brochure of the space shuttle and all of the astronauts. And I remember reading each page about the biographies of each of the astronauts. Somebody was a doctor, somebody was a marine biologist, other people were pilots, and they just had the coolest backgrounds, and they got to go to space. So for me, I was like, this is the coolest job ever. So that really made an impression on me. I also then, as I got older, I obviously loved education, how you're talking about the library before too. And then I thought, well, maybe I want to help teach people and actually be a teacher and teach astronomy, teach science. And so I got really excited about that. And then my next dream job, probably then, a couple years later, was then I wanted to be a scientist and started, help answer some of these questions about the moon or, how to come up with a cure for cancer, things like that. So always curious and asking questions. And so that kind of always led me in terms of those dream jobs that I was thinking about.
That's interesting. So astronaut, very interesting. And tell me, like, when did you hear about the word STEM, and did you have any mentors along the way?
Yes. So when I first heard of the actual like acronym STEM, must have been probably at some point in college, to be honest. But interesting enough, like throughout high school, I really developed a passion for science and technology. Like loved and interesting enough, I growing up was terrible at math. I would get straight A's in pretty much everything I studied except math, which was very perplexing to a lot of my teachers because they're like, "You're doing very well in science. Why?" like usually you science and math, you do really well. What I started to realize as I got older is actually how my brain processes information. I realized that I'm really good when I have an applied problem, which is why I could think about science because I was able to apply mathematics. But if you just ask me to solve a math equation, my brain is like, I have no point of reference. So that was something that was interesting. And then as I got older and, first, like I said, it must have been in college that someone called it STEM. And I was like, oh, okay, science, technology, like now I get it. But my first ever mentor was Coach Metz while I was in high school. And she was our cross country coach. And yes, she was a coach, but she also was a role model for all of us because she helped teach us like leadership skills, communication skills, things beyond just, how to win a race, but really how to function as a team, how to help bring the best out in everybody. If someone wasn't having a good day, how to do conflict resolution. And so many of these, what people might think as just small things, really had a big impact. And it was the first time that I'd met someone that I'm like, wow, like that's a leader. I want to be like that person and be like that in society when I'm older. And so I really took those values with me. So that was like kind of my first memory of a mentor. My second mentor was in college. I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and had my human biology professor, Dr. Quirk. And he was incredible because very similarly, so when I was in college, I originally thought that I wanted to become a doctor. And so I was a pre-med, so studied human biology. I wanted to figure out, if we're going to address climate change, how do we think about human health, food, water, air systems? And he was someone who really helped me think through systems thinking, the importance of thinking in systems. And it was because of him teaching me this, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in today's conversation. Throughout every chapter of my life so far, I've either studied something different or learned some kind of technique or a piece of literature and then applied it to a different domain. And I've realized that has been a consistent theme in my life of systems thinking and applying one domain of thinking and then actually utilizing it in a different way. And it generally leads to really unique solutions, creative problem solving, and things like that. So I'm very grateful also for learning those skills and ways of thinking from Dr. Quirk as well.
That's really interesting because I think it applies to life in many different ways, not just one part of life, but all different aspects of life. And I think we should share that more with our secret agents because they're just learning about all this stuff now. Yes. All right, so let's go back. So your journey from your degree in human bio and psych, so neuroscience at Indiana University. Tell us about that experience. Why did you choose that and why Indiana?
Yeah. So obviously growing up in the Midwest, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. And like many firstborn children, I was like, okay, I know as soon as I get out of high school, where's the farthest away from home I can get? And that was Indiana. So not very far, but hey, I got out of the States. So, I was independent. Interesting enough too, it's also where I was able to get the most scholarships too. And so my parents were like, look, you can go where you want, but you have to be able to get enough scholarships to get the equivalent of in-state tuition. So I applied to a ton of scholarships, and that's what led me to Indiana. I loved that it was a Big Ten school. As I mentioned before, I love sports. So obviously big sports culture. And so ended up going there, and I loved it. First of all, my best friends are from there that I'm still in touch with. I rode for the Little 500 cycling team that they have there. And really, it was just such an incredible experience. I learned a lot. And again, that's where I met, one of my mentors. And so it really set this path for me to think about critical thinking and where I go from there. And as I mentioned before, I originally thought, okay, I want to be a doctor. So I was like, great, I'm going to do pre-med. I love science. And it was also during my time at Indiana that I had my first research job. So as an undergraduate, I joined a research lab. And so I got to actually work in the wet lab and run different studies, and also, was able to get like my first research job. So I was like, wow, okay, like I'm getting, paid some money, and this is really cool. And I didn't realize how much I loved doing research. And that opened a new door to me as well, thinking about, oh, well, do I want to actually be a neurosurgeon? Because I was really fascinated by the brain. So that was the other thing too, is when I was thinking about, well, what kind of doctor? I was like, neuroscience is so cool because we know so little about the brain. There's so much more that we need to study and understand. So that's really why I started focusing on neuroscience. But being able to actually do clinical research and lab-based work also was fascinating, because I felt like, wow, I'm helping answer real-world questions. And understanding it at a much deeper level. So that's really where I got my start, and was the first chapter on my professional journey.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And thanks for clarifying that, because, there's so many types of research. Like I was doing market research before, and like I wanted to make sure that our secret agents know what clinical research is. So can you explain that a little bit more?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So clinical research is really the best way to think about it is applied. So usually you're in not just a standard lab, but either you're working with, it can be humans, it can be different types of animals, et cetera. But you want to test, maybe it's a new type of drug or a vaccine. And so you want to understand, okay, can this actually help solve the problem or cure the disease or make the type of impact that you're hoping to? This is different from a lot more like theoretical research, where you're running the calculations, you're trying to understand, is this even possible? Once you've identified, hey, yes, okay, this particular drug is possible, we're able to make it in the lab. Now we want to test it to see, okay, does it actually, help a human, not become sick anymore, or avoid even getting sick altogether? So really, you're trying to deploy it into the real world and see if it actually has the impact you were hoping it was.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. All right, so then it says that you went to Milano University in Italy.
Oh, yeah. So that was that was while I was in undergrad. So kind of as I started the conversation, I obviously, have wanted to travel. And so I had the opportunity while I was an undergrad. So this would have been my junior year. And again, I knew I wanted to go abroad. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'd never left the country. So I was 21 years old, had never left the country. And I was like, this would be an incredible opportunity. And at the same time, I was like, oh man, like going abroad is very expensive. What are ways that I could go abroad? And I'm all for tourism and exploring new places, but I also wanted to figure out, well, is there a way that it could also help my degree and actually help my research? So it turns out there was a scholarship through the University of Milan to actually be a research intern or a summer researcher through their immunology program. And again, I kind of happened to be at the right place at the right time. I was like, all right, I'll apply for this scholarship. I'll see if I get it. I ended up getting it. So I ended up getting paid to go abroad and do research and be in Italy, which was incredible. So it was probably the best situation possible. Now, once I had my first experience abroad, I was like, wow, this is a whole new world, like new languages, new people, amazing food. I want to see more. And so it planted the travel bug. And so that is something that stuck with me. So I came back for my senior year and then started thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to do next? And I still thought I wanted to be a doctor, but I wanted to figure out, okay, how can I combine my love of research and become a doctor? And at first, again, my only exposure professionally so far had been academia. So I was like, okay, I'll get an MD, PhD, because I only knew how to stay in school. So I was like, all right, I'll work on that. And I started to think, okay, well, if I want to get into medical school, I need more experience, working in a clinical research lab, which is what led me to Boston. So after I graduated, I was like, I want to try to get into Harvard. So I'm going to move to Boston. I'm going to work in some of the labs, get experience, and see, if I like it. But at the same time, something in my life that I always try to answer, even to this day, is what is the hardest problem that I could solve, and what is the biggest impact I can make? And the more I started to learn about, what it takes to be a doctor, and I have so much respect for people who do, I realized I was like, I like it, but I don't love it. And I need to figure out what my why is, what gives me energy. And I started to think, okay, well, if I'm going to answer that question, what is some of the hardest problems I could, help solve? And what is it about medicine and research that excites me? And what are other things I could do that aren't just being a doctor? There are many other things to do. And that's where the systems thinking started to come into play. And I started to realize, well, okay, well, why do people get sick? Well, yes, it can be genetics, but in many cases, it's our environment. It's the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we're breathing. And I started to think, okay, well, what causes changes in the environment that could, increase the likelihood of someone getting sick, getting cancer? And what really intrigued me was this idea of neurodegenerative diseases or autoimmune diseases, where essentially you have this inflammation in your body. And for most diseases in this bucket, we don't have a cure. We're able to help people, be more comfortable, but it's like a Band-Aid. It doesn't actually solve the problem. And I started to ask the question, well, wow, okay, like changes to our environment, climate change is having like a really big impact and actually could have a negative impact on human health. How can I help solve that as a way to make an impact on human health? So then I started to ask the question, okay, well, if I want to help solve climate change, what's one way to do that? And that's where I started talking to one of my other professors who was like, well, another way is thinking about both policy and energy. And what are your energy sources? And if you start creating incentives and new technologies that can help with the adoption of renewable energy, for example, that's another way to help address climate change, to help, make an impact for human health. I was like, wow, okay, like, so how can I get involved? I don't know anything about this domain. And so my professor was like, well, there's actually a new institute being stood up in Geneva, Switzerland. And they're looking for people who can bring a variety of different expertise focused on both human health and climate change. Would you like me to, put you in touch with the person who's running it? I was like, yeah, like, let's do that. And long story short, a couple months later, found myself on a plane to Switzerland. And I was like, I didn't really have much of a plan, except that I was going to figure it out when I got there. And the more I started to talk to people, I realized, wow, okay, I actually want to study this. And so I actually ended up doing my master's out there in Geneva, Switzerland. I got to live out there for 3 years, which was incredible. So kind of building off of what I'd done in undergrad, I knew I wanted to live abroad. So being able to be in Europe, being in the heart of Europe. So on weekends, I would take the train, all over to meet new people, see new cities. So I got to explore. But then also from an applied standpoint, I really focused a lot of my research on, okay, how can we think about new types of technologies that can be used to incentivize the use of renewables into the grid? And so while I was in Geneva, in particular in Switzerland, they're known for hydropower. So being able to leverage whether it's cold water from a lake or a mountain, et cetera, and being able to use that as an energy source. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I started look into different types of technologies, which then started to pique my interest as I started reading literature. I was like, I should probably learn how to code. I should learn how to program. I'd never taken an engineering course. It just so happened that that year is when the first online courses came out for edX and Coursera. And so I highly recommend anyone who's listening who hasn't gone to one of these sites before. Obviously, it's changed a lot in like 10 years. But I was like, wow, you can just go online and learn how to code and take these courses because you're just interested in them, not because someone told you that you had to take them to get a degree or, you know, to finish a homework assignment or something. And that was so cool. It was this new type of freedom that I unlocked that was very similar to what we were talking about with the library. It was like that freedom of knowledge, freedom to learn what you're interested in. And so I ended up teaching myself basic programming and coding to help me understand a lot of these different technologies that I was thinking about. So after finishing my master's, then I was like, okay, well, now what do I do? I'm really excited about this, area of energy and engineering. And well, I want to help build. I actually want to build this technology now. What should I do? And again, I've only known academia. So I was like, PhD. I'm just going to do more research. So I ended up getting invited to work in a research lab at Stanford at a place called Slack National Lab, which is operated by Stanford, and then ended up getting accepted into the School of Engineering for a PhD program, which was incredible. And so if you've been, listening, I mean, each, degree essentially that I've done has been in a different domain. But what's been really key is how I was able to take something that I've learned from each domain and then begin to apply it and continue to apply it. And that's where I started to focus on at Stanford is the intersection of AI and energy. And so that was the focus of what I started my PhD in, was looking at, okay, how do we use this technology to balance the grid? Great. If we're going to have solar and geothermal and hydropower all on the grid, we actually don't have the technology to manage it effectively. And so I became really interested in helping build and solve that problem through new technologies that utility managers could deploy to the grid. So I ended up leading a project for the DOE while I was at Stanford called the Grid Resilience and Intelligence Platform. And so the goal of this was, how do we anticipate, absorb, and recover from grid events? This is if anyone's been in a really bad storm and the power goes out, that's one example, or a really bad snowstorm, et cetera. So anytime the power goes out, one, can we anticipate some of these issues? And then two, when the power does go out, how do we bring it back online as quickly as possible? So was really excited about that, started to build this platform out. And what I loved about it was, great, we're building something that can be used in the real world to help solve real world problems. And that was awesome. I loved it. At the same time, because I was in Silicon Valley for the first time, I was like, what are all these things called startups? Having grown up in the Midwest, I didn't know anyone who had started their own company, or honestly, I'd never, heard anyone talk about entrepreneurship. And so all of a sudden, everywhere I go, everyone's like, yeah, startup, we're starting a company around this. I was like, this is really cool. Like, I haven't heard of this before. And at this time, the world of AI was quickly changing. A lot of developments were happening. For me, a lot of the work at Stanford that I focused on was computer vision. So when I was talking about, if the grid goes out during a storm, what we were looking at is, if you've seen old telephone poles or transformers, et cetera, we wanted to put a bunch of different, almost like GoPro cameras all on the poles, because we wanted to have greater visibility. So for example, if it's been raining a lot out in California, unfortunately we have a lot of wildfires, but if we have a ton of rain in the winter, a lot of vegetation growth can happen very quickly, much quicker than the utility companies can address it. And so it actually creates a hazard for fires. So that was one of the things we were thinking about, is how can we use computer vision to have greater visibility to prevent some of these issues? So we were thinking about a lot of the vision-based AI models. But this is now 2017, 2018. And now a lot of the very early first kind of generative AI models and techniques and architecture start to come out. And people are thinking about those applications. I was like, wow, this sounds really interesting. Let me see what kind of labs are working on this. And I was on Twitter and or X, and had seen someone had sent out a tweet that said, hey, like, we're organizing a happy hour. If anyone wants to come up to San Francisco and meet our lab and our researchers. I was like, this sounds really cool. Well, it turns out that research lab was OpenAI. And so I went up to the city and got to meet all the different researchers and managers. And what really stood out to me was being told, hey, like, we're trying to build AGI that benefits all of humanity. And I was like, whoa, that's like a really big mission. I was like, how are you going to do that? And they're like, well, we're going to get the best, brightest people who are excited to work on this together and help us build it. I was like, that's a really powerful mission. And that is something that really resonated with me more than anything. And again, it was early days. They had a few people, and they're like, we're trying to think about how we're going to begin deploying a lot of these models. And from an applied standpoint, think about everything from energy, the data centers, things like that. And what our developers are ultimately going to be using. What are the different use cases? How are people going to use this technology? Do you want to help? And I was like, oh my gosh. So one of the things also, as you've probably heard in my story, is I've had these moments where it seems crazy, for example, getting on a plane to just move to Switzerland, being offered this opportunity to join a startup that I've never heard of. And ultimately, I dropped out of my PhD to join them. Didn't know what was going to happen. But what I have realized is the importance of listening to your gut. Sometimes your brain can't rationalize why, but deep down, something about it feels right, and you at least need to try. And that was something that just for a lot of these big moments in my life or key decisions that I made, it was because I listened to my gut. And so I ended up becoming the first technical director to the CTO at OpenAI, and led the launches of GPT-2, GPT-3, Rubik's Cube, and many others. And it was an incredible experience. It was chaotic, crazy, learned a ton, worked with some of the best, amazing people ever, many friends to this day. And so it was, again, one of those just incredible experiences. At the same time, after we launched GPT-3, I got a phone call from NASA. And I was like, NASA, what's going on? How can I help? And they're like, we want to integrate GPT-3. And I was like, great. Like, what do you want to use it for? And for me, I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to want to create a new type of space mission, new types of vehicles, all kinds of things. And they're like, we have so much data. We don't know what to begin to do with it. We need help on insights. And I was like, oh, is that a NASA problem, or is that a bigger problem for the whole aerospace industry? And so again, I started to ask the question, how is AI and machine learning being used in aerospace? So made a couple phone calls, did a bunch of research, and realized, oh my goodness, this is a huge problem because many companies are so hardware first, which makes sense. You want to focus on the hardware, and Hollywood has taught us bad things happen when you have AI agents on a space station. But the technology has matured, and I realized, oh my gosh, all the tech is happening really fast over here, and aerospace is still over here. We need to close that gap because there's so much opportunity to be able to use this technology. And so after 3 awesome years at OpenAI, I left to actually help take everything that I've learned and apply that to the aerospace industry. And so I've been in the aerospace industry now for the last 4 years. And it honestly is funny because just to come back to where we started the conversation, I knew I wanted to do something in space. And I've now have the opportunity to be able to do so and focus on, how are we going to industrialize space? How can we use this incredible environment that has microgravity and ultra high vacuum, you can make materials that are only possible in space. And those things actually can make a difference here on Earth, whether those are pharmaceuticals or those are new types of materials that are more energy efficient, lighter, and better for the environment. And so that's what I'm currently spending my time on now. But that's kind of the quick version of my life story and kind of where I've ended up.
Wow, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like a phenomenal journey, and it sounds like there should be a book and maybe a movie.
One day.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go backtrack a couple of things, because I think our secret agents might not know a few things. So one is, you mentioned learning coding and basic coding. So is there specific languages that you learned, and what would you recommend for our secret agents to learn? Because there's a lot of kind of back and forth now about, oh, you don't need to learn code anymore because, Chat GPT is going to take over and AI is going to take over and whatever. But I come from a place where, like you were saying, like Steve Jobs said, like everything you learned, like he learned Japanese, it was back to Apple. Like anything he did, calligraphy, it was back to all the things he did just because he thought it was cool and fun.
Yep.
Were helping him along the way on his journey, right? So tell us about the languages that you learned. And also you mentioned AGI, and what does that mean?
Oh, yes. So I'll start with that and then work my way backwards. So AGI means artificial general intelligence. Many people have different definitions, but the most widely accepted definition is any type of AI model that can do, I don't want to say just better, but to supersede the capability that a human can. So let's say, to use the coding example, it may take me 10 hours to make to code up a particular web application. But with AGI, not only can they make the web application in like a minute, but also have developed a strategy for go-to-market to get customers, already set up a true systems thinking, kind of what I was talking about before. So very, very advanced technology that combines all the things we take for granted as humans. So the way that I can talk to you right now, but also like see your reactions on your face. I can hear things. You're bringing in all of this data basically, and our brain is processing it all at the same time. So to your question on then, well, oh no, well, if we have AGI coming, what does that mean for learning new skills, particularly coding and programming? So if I were to turn back the clock 10 years ago, there are some languages that I learned that, I mean, some professors may argue with me, but that's okay, is like that I don't think we need anymore. And there are some languages that I think are worth learning or applying some of those applications. So for example, some of the languages I learned was like Julia to do like statistical analysis, things like that. Those are some of the languages that I think, you can just go ahead and use some of like the kind of AI like code co-pilots for. But I do, if I were to put myself today, if I were learning code today, I would start with Python. I would learn and understand the basics of Python because it is one of the most widely accepted, if not the language that's accepted for machine learning and AI. So it really is just a core bedrock to understanding a lot of these different AI applications. The other thing too is, it's going to sound a little silly when I say this, but when we're working on GPT-2 and GPT-3, you may have heard of something called prompt engineering, which is a very fancy way of saying, do you know how to ask the AI model or program, if you will, the set of instructions that you would like to give the AI model for what you would like it to do? That is going to be an incredibly important skill. The thing as humans, ironically, is we're not the best at asking questions. We're kind of lazy. So the people who can figure out how to ask really good questions and give really good instructions are going to be the ones who can build really, really powerful AI applications and do some really cool things with it. One way, the example I like to give people of, when you're interacting with an AI model, how does this prompt engineering work? If you've ever played the game charades, it's a lot like that because you're effectively trying to give just enough. You don't want to have to give all the information. That's like too exhausting. You just want to give enough information for your teammate to figure out what you're trying to have them do or say or draw. Same thing with an AI model. You want to give it the bare minimum amount of information so it does exactly what you do. The problem is sometimes, you tell it to do one thing and it understands it, as something else, or it needs more context, things like that. So that's the other thing that I think going forward is going to be an incredibly valuable skill. Is really the future of programming is the future of asking really good questions and being able to articulate, key instructions in addition to some of the core programming languages like Python.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear your take on like the other languages that lead to like gaming and other, because I feel like our secret agents might be interested in that kind of stuff. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, so what I am super excited about is we were talking about before, should we be learning coding or not? What I'm most excited about is a lot of the new kind of co-pilot agents that can help you learn, because that is something I didn't even have when I was learning. I mean, not just coding, but learning anything in school. So that if there was something of interest that you wanted to understand, or maybe it wasn't clear, that you could, help you understand or debug your code. So for example, one of the kind of best apps that I've seen so far, it's called Cursor, like, the cursor for your mouse. Cursor.ai does a really, really great job in terms of being able to be your, kind of coding co-pilot. So I think pretty much all the major languages are covered from there. And so that's probably one of the ones that excites me the most. And like, again, I wish I had 10 years ago, just the tech didn't exist yet. So I think a lot of the languages, interesting enough, are actually going to be used more because you can actually debug much more quickly and understand it. So here's a real world example. Many of the banks today all still rely on really, really old code like Fortran, maybe COBOL. There are very few people in the world who know how to write code in those languages. But what people are starting to do is actually do code translation. So being able to say, okay, well, here's this program in Fortran, translate this into Python for me, for example. So is there a way that actually we don't lose code, and we're actually able to upgrade it in a way in, what are some of the languages that are being used more frequently today as well, or vice versa. If you come across legacy code, what does this mean? Let's, I don't program in Fortran. So, okay, tell me, or in Lisp, etc. How can I debug this if something needed to be fixed?
Yeah, that's funny that you bring up Fortran, because I actually learned how to code Fortran here in elementary school in LAUSD back in the 80s with a female computer science teacher on it.
That's awesome.
And the only way I remembered, because I was so obsessed with playing Carmen Sandiego every day, because we also did that too. Yes. Third grade, that was the jam, right? Yes. It was the movie Hidden Figures. They said Fortran. I'm like, oh my God, that was my first coding language. I can't believe that. I totally forgot about that completely. Yes. But I feel like coding, for me at least, because I had to learn again and new languages starting, the companies, like it's like a foreign language, right? So when you were in Italy, you learned Italian, right? Because you had to, you didn't have a choice. You probably spoke French between Switzerland and all the other things, right? Yep. And so Spanish you probably took in LA or in school when you were here in the States. Yep. And English is English. It's just a universal language. So I feel like that kind of what is coding in a sense, but then you never really lose it. Although I was kind of like foggy about it, but I thought that was really interesting. So it's definitely a foreign language. So you've done all those things. And then at one point, did you go to Y Combinator? Because I don't know if you mentioned that.
Oh, yeah. So it was actually during the pandemic. So I didn't go to Y Combinator. They actually have an online course for future founders. So it was actually thanks to that online course that it helps answer the questions like, would you want to ever start your own company in the future? So the idea is, do you want to be a future founder? And so it helps ask the questions, what are some of the problems you want to help solve? How to think about that? How do you think about de-risking some of the technology or the product? So it was a really, really great introductory way to think about entrepreneurship. Like I said, I had zero experience. And so being able to have this course online, which is another reason why I'm such a huge supporter of not just online learning because it's online, but it's more of, again, the library example. I'm a big supporter of being able to have tools and resources available for people to choose their own adventure. So whatever you're interested in, like whether that's entrepreneurship, like, do you want to be a founder? Cool. Let me pull up the Y Combinator Future Founders course. Do you want to learn Python? Great. Let me pull up Coursera and take a, Python 101 course. You're able to be driven by your curiosity. And that's how people, I think, is one of the ways people learn best, is when it's not work. It's fun because you're learning for the joy of learning. No one's forcing you, or you're trying to, finish some kind of homework assignment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yes, I've had good success with that.
No, that's awesome. And I think we're going to find out if that still exists, because we could probably add like a link to that too. For secret agents, because I think that could be really helpful for them, diving deep into getting into startups at that young age. Maybe sometimes, you never know. Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things. You have a private pilot's license, so tell us when you got that, and then also the open water scuba diver, which is really fun and exciting. It sounds like explorers under the sea and above the clouds, which realms. And then also the list of things that you've done. So World Economic Forum, Edmund Hillary Fellow, like blockchain instructor at Stanford, like WEF advisory board, like project lead, like mentor project that you're doing now. So tell us a little bit about all of those.
Yeah. So one thing too is I love having multiple projects. So when I was in grad school, started doing my own consulting projects, got involved with the World Economic Forum. That opened up a new network to me. While I was at Stanford, I helped teach these executive courses and being able to apply my research, but then help disseminate that information. So again, in a weird way, when you asked me what were some of my dream jobs, I've had the opportunity to actually do kind of versions of them. Being able to, work in the space industry, being able to teach people new types of tools and technologies. So I've always loved having different projects, and then not just being able to communicate those or teach those, but then mentor and again, much like Coach Metz and Dr. Quirk did, I wish I even had met mentors earlier in my life as well. And so I'm a big believer in, paying it forward or paying it back as well. And so I'm very grateful for the mentors I did have. And hopefully I can be a mentor to many folks as well by, one, sharing my story, and also just, the things I've learned along the way, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so that's definitely been key to me. The other key piece is also, to have fun and to make, as much as, work and job and school can take up your life. It's really important to make time for yourself, for your passions, and to really, do the things that you want to. You never know when your time is up. And so I'm a big believer of to really go after those dreams as early as you can. And so for me, two of my big bucket list items were, I want to get my pilot's license. As I said, my uncle was a pilot. I thought it was so cool growing up. He'd tell me all the places that he had flown to. And then once I started traveling internationally, I just loved being on a plane. To me, like, being on a plane is my happy place. There's a thing in astronauts called the overview effect. And so the idea of the overview effect is that many astronauts, when they go into space, they look back at Earth and you're overcome with this emotion because you realize how small our planet really is. And you don't see all the lines, the borders, the stress, the tensions. You see a very beautiful planet. And it's something really special. And so many astronauts, when they come back, are just very moved by this. The interesting thing is, if you've ever looked out of a window when you're, on a plane, you kind of have like a mini version of that, of just flying out. If you've ever flown across the US, like, this is such a big country with so many incredible places. And so I've always appreciated that, of just, it gives you literally a new perspective. So that was something that I've loved about flying, really. I've just always felt in my element. So got my pilot's license. Let's see, it's 2024. So started it 3 years ago. And I loved it. Like, I'm so happy when I'm flying. And so that's probably actually one of my proudest achievements in life. It was a lot of work. You still also have to keep current to keep your license up. And then there are different certifications you can get. So it's always a challenge. And so it's a beautiful combination of you're having to listen to air traffic control, you're having to communicate what you're doing, what you're seeing, plus flying the plane and monitoring weather. I mean, it is a full sensory experience. And for me, ironically, many people are like, isn't that stressful? To me, actually, it's when I'm most in flow state and I'm able to actually, kind of just go to a different place. Related, one of my friends from OpenAI, we really wanted to get scuba certified. And that was something also just both of us were like, yeah, ever since we were kids, like to go scuba diving, get like open water certification would be awesome. So we went to Monterey Bay, and so did our open water certification. It took us, so you first have to like go in the pool. And so that there's a couple weeks of like pool training. And then you go for 2-3 days out to the open ocean and do your full certification. And it can be definitely scary because you're underwater, you can't talk. So being able to, you literally are communicating by sign language and, to the people in your group, and you have to control your breathing. And I've never been someone who can meditate very well. As you can tell, I'm just very energetic. So sitting still is not my strong suit. But interesting enough, scuba diving really forced me to think about my breath, to stay calm. And it was actually like being on another planet. It was so cool to see all kinds of fish, the kelp forest. I mean, beautiful. And so again, just another part of our planet that very few people, see on a regular basis. And it just, again, continues to make me appreciate like what an awesome planet we live on. And it has so many great places that you can have incredible adventures with. So I'm very, very happy that I did that as well.
Very cool. Okay, so in the meantime, you're also have been or currently an angel investor, a venture partner, and then also founder and CEO at Stealth. Can you tell us anything about those?
Yeah. So back when I was at OpenAI, I started angel investing and, again, getting more involved in the startup world and understanding, wow, okay, like what it takes to be a founder, what are some of the really cool problems people are solving, and how can I help support them? And so I got really excited about a lot of the deep tech companies. And so everything from, rockets to cybersecurity to biotech was awesome. And so I got involved with that. Also got asked to be a venture partner with an incredible venture firm led by Promise Phelan called Growth Warrior Capital. And so it's been really great to be a part of that, particularly as they think about their AI strategy, how different companies are integrating AI technology, both into their own internal company operations, as well as the types of products that they're building as well. And then most recently, my current company, so we're currently in Stealth, but focused on, as I said, different materials manufacturing for the aerospace industry. So we'll have more to share on that in a few months, but been working on that, and that's been an awesome experience as well. And then in my spare time, also recently joined the Mentor Project as well. And that has been an incredible experience, bringing together some really, really awesome people. And again, being able to both be a mentor, but then also learning from the other mentors as a mentee myself. And I think that's one of the key things is, to never stop learning, to never stop asking questions, and that you always can be in this role of, always learning, and you can also be an expert at something too.
That's a really good point. And I think I'm going to switch to some student questions just
Yeah.
because you brought up something. So it says you've had various career changes over the years, from being a scientist to entrepreneur to angel investor, to name a few. Could you speak more about how you navigated these pivots in your life and what helped you overcome moments of uncertainty?
Yes. First and foremost, having really great support from friends and family, even if they were like, oh my gosh, you're dropping out of Stanford. Like, why would you ever do that? At the same time, they're like, we don't know why you're doing it, but we support you. And that's super important. But also, more importantly, even if people say, oh my gosh, that's crazy, you have to believe in yourself. And that's what I was mentioning before about listening to your gut. That in my experience, the times in my life that I decided to not listen to my gut, I was wrong. And when I do listen to my gut, I almost always am right. And it's something that as you continue to grow and progress in your career, being able to really hone listening to your gut. And that, again, has been something that the more I listen to it, yes, it's taken me on these wild adventures and all different types of career changes, but it's also given me such a incredible journey that's been able to build on top of these things. I think also one thing I mentioned earlier was the idea of, for every new type of domain that you begin or that you've studied, being able to take something from that and apply that to the next one, that really also makes such a difference as well. And so I think what this really boiled down to was, how do you find your why? Always ask that question, is what is your why? And that's the thing, is that answer will change over time based on your interests. So it is not something that you answer, okay, I found my why and I'm sticking to it. For some people, maybe you'll have the answer, for your whole life. But for most people, that why is going to change. So being able to figure out, well, okay, I'm motivated by this, or this is what matters to me, and let that help lead your gut to what your interests are. But I think the most important thing is we grow up being told, okay, you need to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And then you follow that path in a nice, neat line. The biggest thing you realize when you're adult is no one does that. Very few people do that, because that's not life. Ironically, we're taught to follow a linear path, but life isn't linear. Life is full of surprises, lots of ups and downs. And the most important thing is to figure out how to be adaptable, that there's always going to be punches. All you can do is to figure out how to roll with them.
Very good point. On that note, what did you learn when you were 11 years old that you've kept with you today?
Oh, yes. So I loved playing basketball as a kid. If I were standing up, you'd see that I'm 5'4", so I'm not very tall. But I loved playing basketball. And the key thing that I took away when I was 11, which was the power of execution. And what I mean by that is, you don't need permission to go ahead and execute on something. You can just go and do it. And for me, that lesson came about when I ended up making what we had, like A team and B team, which in middle school was the equivalent of like junior varsity and varsity. So I made the equivalent of the varsity team, and I was the only person who wasn't part of one of those traveling clubs during the summer. So basically for summer, before tryouts, I was in my driveway. I was doing drills by myself, just every day, grinding it out, because I knew what I wanted. I knew what the goal was, and I was going to fight for it. And so being able to show up every day and just execute, because most people, they say they're going to do something. It's a whole nother thing to actually go ahead and do something, to take action and to execute. And that has been a key lesson that, wow, okay, if you put in that work, doesn't matter if you were on a traveling club or you got the best basketball shoes, if you put in the work, that really, really counts for 99% of getting things done.
That's a really good point. On that note, looking into the future is exciting. What do you imagine for girls in STEM down the road, and how can we make sure that everyone gets a chance to be part of the STEM adventure?
Yes. So what really excites me kind of talking, going back to what we were talking about before, is being able to have AI as this incredible tool that everyone can use, not just for coding, but being able to think about what are new types of science projects we can do. What are different ways we can learn? For, again, if I could go back in time, I wish I had AI back then. Any of the tools, I wish I had ChatGPT back when I was in 5th grade to help me understand my math homework, to explain it in a way that actually the way my brain thinks. Or again, so everyone can have really personalized learning, because that's the other thing is we all learn differently, and that's beautiful and that's incredible. The problem is a lot of school systems are really, built only for one way of learning, and that's not how humans are. So for the future of STEM, my hope is that we're going to be able to take advantage of a lot of new technologies and tools that will use AI in education systems, so that people can start engaging with STEM way earlier and unlocking what their passions are even earlier, and explore and ask those questions.
That's a good point. Going back to that, like, what advice will you give our aspiring secret agent trainees in the audience?
Yes. So first, always be curious. Never lose that curiosity. That's what, makes us feel alive. So always stay curious, and related to that, never stop asking questions. And really then that's going to help also, help you listen to your gut. But as I was saying before, just never stop learning. That is, the act of learning is something that will never go away. It's not just, because you have a degree, like, okay, my learning is done. I finished, high school, I finished college, I'm done. No, learning is something that you will take with you all the way. And that's what unlocks these really new, exciting opportunities as well.
That's a very, very good point, and lots of really good advice. I'm going to go back to one more question from the students, just because I think this is important. Mm-hmm. Any advice to young girls that that are interested in pursuing a career in the field of AI specifically?
Yes. So I think there are a lot of really great courses out there now, whether they're online or through different apps. And I can definitely share a couple that you can link at the end of this. So if you're interested in AI now, like, take some beginner courses, or even just, sign up for whether it's, ChatGPT or Claude or any of these others, and start playing around with it. So again, thinking of that curiosity, but also the act of playing and interacting with these AI models to maybe build a web app, or, hey, create a reading list for me. I'm really interested in Italy, new types of food, and aviation. Like, give me the top 10 books that kind of cover these 3 areas. And so you can begin to explore these new types of applications and areas. So I think that is a really great way to get started.
Okay, and then one more thing. What does a typical day look like for you?
That's, the short answer is there's no such thing as a typical day for me. And I don't think actually for most people. For me, these days I am traveling a lot, not internationally, domestically. So I am meeting with different partners, whether it's from NASA or here in DC, folks in government, or out in LA with different space companies, and thinking through, all different kinds of opportunities to work together and think about the future of the space economy and what we can do with that. So for me, it's everything from, emails and catching up with folks to meeting with key partners and traveling around the country these days.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Okay, how can our special secret agent trainees follow your journey moving forward? Do you have a website, LinkedIn, Instagram? What's the best?
Yeah, so I'm not huge social media. I'll work on being better, but I'm mainly on Twitter. So you can follow me. My handle is at Aviator Ashley. And or you could follow me on LinkedIn. And then I do have a website that's just www.ashleypilipiszyn.com. I haven't updated it in a very long time, but maybe this is a motivation for me to do so.
Yeah, it takes a while. And then you are known as the space industrialist as well. So that's another thing we're going to add to your name and everything else you're going to share with us. Yes. All right, so we're going to do key takeaways in a minute. So thank you for all of this. It's been really awesome and informational. But let's do 60 seconds really quick. So favorite toy as a kid?
Lego sets.
Awesome. Favorite video game?
Hot Wheels. It was the one, the computer game where you could create different Hot Wheels tracks. So my brother and I loved playing that, where, go through the entire house and, the Hot Wheels would fly over the grill and stuff like that. Or now that I'm thinking about it, I also loved Math Blasters. It was like a math video computer game.
Yeah, I remember that. CD-ROM, yes.
Yes.
Back in the day. Yes. Favorite sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek, both or none, whatever you like.
Favorite sci-fi movie, Interstellar. Star Wars fan, specifically The Mandalorian.
Awesome. Favorite superhero?
Probably Spider-Man.
Awesome. And then favorite animated series as a kid or now?
Let's see. I mean, SpongeBob was always a good one growing up. I love good comedy. And I think even when I see some SpongeBob memes today, they're still funny. So laughter is always good for the soul.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those. All right. So key takeaways. So let us know if we missed anything, please. Leveraging knowledge from one domain can foster unconventional and innovative problem-solving skills. Reflect on the toughest problems you can solve and the greatest impact you can make to guide your life direction. Mm-hmm. Trust your gut, believe in yourself, and embrace new opportunities. For aspiring programmers, focus on mastering Python and prompt engineering. Pursue your dreams early and with determination and adaptability. Always ask questions and strive to learn new things. There is immense power in execution.
Yes. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your phenomenal journey with us. I'm sure that our super secret agents will probably want to reach out and learn more from you. And especially we're going to link your mentor program as well, because I think that will be huge for them. And that's it for us today at WhizGirls Academy. Thank you, super secret agents. We'll tune in again tomorrow. See you soon.